I think it's because we're sharing the parish login details probably. So yeah, that's cool. I don't really need to look at myself really large on the screen as long as I can. So yeah, Stephen and I are going to talk about Herod this week, and I imagine we're going to be talking about power and the true nature of kingship and people who are in power who don't want to let go of that. But yeah, I think we feel like we know a lot about the Christmas story, but there is a lot we can learn. So over the next few weeks, we're talking about Herod, we're talking about Simeon and Anna, talking about John the Baptist, who normally gets 2 lots of preaching.
Right.
Only going to get 1 this Advent.
Yeah.
And then Mary.
Good.
So yeah. Yeah.
And I'm hoping, so when you and I sat down to plan this, Claire, we thought it'd be fun. Well, because I'm a political theologian, right? So I spend all my time thinking about the social, political context of the New Testament and all that kind of stuff. And I just thought, well, what if we did almost the politics of Advent, or the political, so King Herod and John the Baptist, like, and actually Mary as well. All these people are we're gonna see all sorts of fun stuff when you look at them through my lens.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really fun. So you and I are going to chat for about 20 minutes, half an hour, and people are going to type in any questions or comments in the chat.
Yes.
We'll open up the floor, and we'll deal with any questions that have come up, and we'll just continue the conversation.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens.
That simple.
I like, yeah. What could possibly go wrong? It's really good to have you here, and it's good to see you. We've spoken a few times, but it's good to see you. Yeah. Wow.
Does everyone know that you were one of my students at St. Mellitus College?
No, I haven't said that. So and I'm not trying to butter you up or anything, Stephen, but I think I've told you that yours are the only notes that I saved.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I always used to like the fact that Stephen would call out the people who were really obviously just on the internet during your, and you'd actually ask them to leave, which I loved. You're like, well, if you don't want to be here, that's fine, but please go away. Love it.
You're not little kids, you're adults, you can do what you want.
It always amazes me that even in theological college, you've got the naughty kids on the back row who were just goofing off. So
that's why this kind of thing is so much more fun, because there's no essays, there's no hoops you're jumping through.
Yeah.
It's here for the interest. We're not here for
no essays. Oh, thank you, Lord. I love learning, but not so much essays. And definitely not having to write a bibliography. So
you should try marking them. They're the worst.
Oh no. That must be awful. Awful.
So tell us about Herod, Claire. Tell us about where does Herod fit in your landscape, your Christian imagination? Where does Herod have a place?
Herod is like the Bond villain.
Okay.
In the New Testament. I imagine him like, I don't know. He's just mean. He's nasty. Doing the more research I did on that guy, the more I mean, okay, he's a complicated person. Right. And I didn't realize what a great administrator he was. He was a great builder. He got stuff sorted. He was good with law and order because he just killed everyone who just So he built himself what looks like a fake volcano just outside Bethlehem.
Okay.
I've been there. So, and it's called Herodia, something like that. He named everything Herod.
All his children Herod, including his daughters. So there's something going on there, right?
I know, right? Yeah. So, he was totally paranoid. He fought for 3 years to get himself known as the King of the Jews.
Right.
All that we really learn about him as kids is that awful thing he did when he killed all the young baby boys because he thought that he was going to get Jesus. Do you commemorate the slaughter of the innocents? Is that part of your liturgical year? I don't know. I think there's definitely a day. There's probably a day for most things in the church year if you look hard enough.
Yeah.
I'm sure, but it's a particularly nasty thing, isn't it?
It really only shows up for you in when you're thinking about Advent. It's a baby Jesus Christmas story kind of guy.
So Herod the Great, we only hear about him with baby Jesus, but then it was one of his sons, Herod Antipas, I think, who always reminds me of Antipasti, which it's not the same thing.
He's the one who kills Jesus.
He's the one with the dancing Salome and John the Baptist. Yeah.
And then Herod Antipas's nephew, Herod Agrippa, shows up in Acts.
Okay.
One who tries Paul. So there's a through line. There's a lineage of these Herods who are always villains.
Yes.
And they always
they're desperate to be in power.
Well, you mentioned it right from the start, didn't you? You said King of the Jews. So Herod the Great, I guess the New Testament sort of treats Herod as sort of interchangeably just one person, even though it is three different people. In a way, he kind of stands in for that line, which is the line of Herod the Great was a puppet king, right? He was set up by the Romans to rule over the Jews, and he wasn't really Jewish.
So Herod's father was set up by Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
And then he passed it on to Herod the Great.
So
who called him Herod the Great? Was that him or his dad?
I don't know about that. The Romans were the ones who said, we're going to send you, Herod the Great, we're going to send you back into Judea, and we're going to call you King of the Jews. So he comes in to Jerusalem, calling himself King of the Jews, backed up by foreign Gentile army, right?
Great. That's going to make you super, super popular with the locals.
Herod was sort of Jewish, but he wasn't on the home team. He wasn't seen by Jews as a friend. He was
or if you're around here, he weren't local.
Yeah,
he was not local. He hadn't lived there for like generations.
Yeah.
But then he married into a local aristocratic family, didn't he?
Yeah, as a way to try and prove his bona fides as a Jewish person.
And then he killed them all.
Including his own wife.
Yeah.
He was a real nasty piece of work. And the whole Herod dynasty was a little bit more like what we might think of as mobsters or something. I mean, they didn't run, they ran themselves. They were very corrupt. They were jobs for the boys. They weren't, the way the New Testament treats them is a sense of like, they say they stand for King of the Jews and running the nation really well. But at every turn, they really just care about themselves. And Herod stands as the contrast to Jesus, right? Which is why we think of Herod as an Advent. He works as an Advent person.
Yeah.
Because he's introduced to us as the opposite of what Jesus is, right? So, but he also sets the real context. It's not just symbolic. Like you get Herod the Great calling himself King of the Jews, and of course that was the phrase that Jesus was crucified for, right?
Yes.
And that was the phrase. So when the magicians from the East come and they say we think there's a king who's been born, and so you realize like it's really this word is vibrating with meaning for Herod, right? It's really important that he is the King of the Jews, and now along comes other people who say this Jesus guy is.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing in the Gospels is like a story of it's not a religious conflict. Everybody thinks that Christianity is a religion. It's not.
It's not a religion.
It's an alternative, right? Like the Gospels are telling you the story of a political upheaval and opposition. It's not religious. And right from the start, Mark tells you this. He says, "I'm going to tell you the story in the beginning." The good news, which means the news of the coming of the rightful king.
Yeah.
His name is Jesus, and he is God's king. And so you just kind of constantly get that, and in Luke and Matthew as well. And so obviously the very first person who's going to be annoyed by the rightful king is going to be Herod.
Yeah.
He in some ways is the arch bad guy, even though he's not the one who ultimately, it's Pilate who ultimately kills Jesus, but it's, some ways it's Herod that is the linchpin to all of these problems. Yeah.
I couldn't help feeling a little bit sorry for him. I know that's ridiculous. Well, it's ridiculous, okay. But I'm not normally that caring, but he was in some ways a great king. He would have been hailed as a really good, he was a good politician.
Okay, you said he built stuff. What kind of stuff did he build?
He built Caesarea, so a port. He built cities. He built towns. He built forts for himself all over the place. He had a special swimming pool that he would drown people in. Okay, that wasn't great. That was not good. But he built roads with the help of the Romans.
You know you're missing the one main building he built. Do you know what he built?
The temple.
Yeah.
He did some incredible stuff there, and they still hated him.
Well, he also built Caesarea Philippi, which was a shrine. Well, it was a big temple to Caesar as a god. So he was hedging his bet.
Yeah.
But the reason they hated him for the temple was because he builds the temple as his way of kind of proving, because if you think about the way temples are built, like David wanted to build a temple and he wasn't allowed to. Solomon builds the temple. King Josiah rebuilds the temple. Like, to build your temple is to show that you are the rightful ruler of the Jews. And so Herod builds his thing, which is this massive building structure. But the problem with the temple, of course, is that the temple is where you have to go to do your sacrifices to be made pure. Okay?
Yeah.
But when you live in this first century, the main thing that's making you impure is that you live in a land run by Gentiles. Yeah. All the dust that gets on your feet, or the food that you touch, or the money, the coins that you hold, the whole thing is unclean, right? And so you're unclean because you live in a land run by Gentiles. The only place to go is the temple to be made clean. And yet Herod, who was set up by Gentiles, the one who built the temple. So the temple itself is just part of the problem. And
I think there was a colonnade really close to the temple, which was where the Pilate lived.
Yeah,
it was not far away.
There was a garrison of soldiers attached to the temple. Do you know what the abomination that causes desolation is?
Various different things. Was it something that happened 70 years after, or was?
Well,
tell me.
More than once, really. There seems to be a couple of times where different foreign rulers had set up a statue inside the temple of themselves.
Wasn't there pig sacrifice at one point?
Yeah, possibly. Like they basically would do stuff to sacrilege the temple.
Yeah.
And Jesus talks about it, and this is seen as the abomination. But Herod, he built a golden eagle which he put outside the temple,
which is the emblem of the Roman army.
Right. So this isn't just religion we're talking here. The temple's not just some religious building. This is like nationalism and national pride and occupied territory stuff.
Wow.
And the Romans have their symbols and their soldiers in the temple, which Herod built. So it's starting to set the stage for what Jesus is going to do, right?
Yeah.
He cleanses the temple in order to let more foreigners in, for example, and everybody wants him to kill Herod and the Romans. Instead, he says, "Oh no, we should make this open for everybody." So
he was so annoying.
So annoying, which is the moment that the crowd turns on Jesus. Eventually, they're the ones who are going to want to kill him because of that, because he refuses to cleanse the temple.
Yeah.
But Herod's behind all of this.
He is.
I was thinking about, so you mentioned John the Baptist. What's that story? John the Baptist,
Which bit about him? All
right, so he gets killed by Herod Antipas.
I think it was, oh gosh, I'm sure we can be proven wrong on this.
Herod the Great, Herod the Great kills he kills the innocents.
Yes.
Bethlehem. Although, to be fair, those records don't appear anywhere else except in Matthew's Gospel.
Yeah.
But I did read about that, and somebody said, well, if you think about it, there probably wouldn't have been that many people in Bethlehem of that age. It wasn't that big a town. So it could have happened and just not registered on anybody's radar. But anyway, it shows up in Matthew.
Yeah.
And then Herod Antipas is the one who takes over, and he's like a mobster, and he marries his own sister or something.
Sister-in-law?
Sister-in-law.
Yeah.
So John the Baptist is against
Herod. But actually that Herod had a bit of a soft spot for John the Baptist. So he actually quite liked listening to him.
Yes, and he was sort of tricked into killing him.
Yeah, by a very, very good sexy dance.
And even that kind of story is just showing you what kind of sordid criminals John the Baptist and Jesus are up against, right?
Yeah.
There's this interesting phrase, because do you remember Jesus says at one point in Matthew 12, I think it is, or 7, he says to the people, like, they're saying, "Are you John the Baptist?" And he says, "Why did you go out into the desert to see? Did you go out to see a reed swaying in the wind?" Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where is that?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
We'll come to them later.
Matthew 11:7, right?
Mm-hmm.
John's disciples had gone. Jesus spoke to the crowds about John. "Why did you go out into the wilderness to see? Did you want to see a reed blowing in the wind? What did you go out to see? A man dressed up in refined clothes? Look, those who wear refined clothes are in royal palaces. What did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. He is the one who said, 'I'm sending my messenger before you. You will prepare a way for you.' I assure you that no one who has been born is greater than John the Baptist, yet the least in the kingdom is greater than he." But that thing about when he says the reed swaying in the wind, that was Herod's symbol.
Oh, really?
Herod here.
Oh.
So what he's saying is, so Herod had his coins stamped with a reed on them.
Okay.
Symbol that this was the image he used to show his dominance, right?
Yeah.
And Jesus is saying, he's basically making that link. He's going, "Why are you guys out? You're out in the desert. Who did you think you were going to meet? You're not going to meet Herod. You were looking to meet the guy with the fine clothes and the reed swaying in the wind. We're not here to meet him. We're out in the wilderness, because the centers of power, what's important is out in the wilderness with John the Baptist and me. It's not in the temples. It's not in the courts in the cities." He's making a political point.
Well.
And the other thing about the reed is that, you remember the famous, we do this in Palm Sunday. You're going to do this with your liturgy, right? Where everybody's saying Jesus is coming into the temple.
Yeah.
And the people are waving the palm branches and they're saying Hosanna. Palm branches, same thing. Okay. That was Herod's coins. The palm branches and the reeds, he would use these symbols. And so the idea that the palm branches swaying in the wind was a kingly thing to do. It was like a political gesture.
Right.
People are saying, "Oh, look, here comes our true king." And they're expecting Jesus to act the way they wanted him to act. They want him to kick out the foreigners. They want him to replace Herod.
Yeah.
By waving the palms. And he doesn't.
No, he really doesn't.
So Herod grew out. He's not just the guy that kills the babies at the beginning. The name Herod is always associated with showing the opposite of who Jesus would be. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. He's not a happy guy. I imagine it was difficult to be friends with him.
Why do you think he liked John the Baptist?
I don't know, because John didn't give a what's it. He really just didn't. John just said what he thought. And I imagine if you're the kind of person who kills all of your enemies, people are super nice to your face. And John the Baptist was just not.
Yeah, he was right. He was it was a truth teller.
Yeah. Sometimes it's such a relief to have people to actually tell you what they really think. Maybe.
Yeah, that's true, right? I mean, he was always out in the wilderness is an interesting aspect of Jesus, and John are always out in the wilderness. And there's something about the fact that they're outside of those centers of power is important.
Yeah.
And that's part of John's appeal, is that he's not part of that world. And so he speaks against it and from outside it. Yeah. But
he seems to understand it, and people really want to come to him. So I think we all live in the middle of the countryside. Well, mostly everybody who's watching this. So I wonder whether there's something here for us. I don't know.
He represents cities. He really does.
Yeah.
And cities are not a good thing really in the New Testament. Not in like Jesus's world.
Oh man, I miss cities. I really do. Personally, I'm very much looking forward to going and being surrounded by people I don't know.
Cities are like where everybody thinks that they're self-sufficient.
Oh yeah.
And they think they have no worry. So we know how in Matthew Jesus talks about the poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit.
Yeah.
And the word he's using there, the word poor in spirit, is the word you'd use for people who don't know where their resources are going to come from the next day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's kind of like, blessed are the people who are living day by day.
So properly hand to mouth.
But those are country people.
Yeah.
Because the cities are the ones which have all the infrastructure and the and things are, you can kind of get the myth of self-sufficiency when you live in the city. And there's this idea that Herod and the others, they're thinking of themselves as they're the law to themselves, they're their own power, they're their own resources. And that's always the New Testament call is always to go out in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Don't go into the cities. Avoid the cities. So even his brothers say, hey, you should go into the city, you should go to Jerusalem if you want more followers. And Jesus lies to them. He goes, you go on, you go ahead. I don't feel like going today. And he tricks them, and then he goes in.
It's always one of the things about Jesus that people ask about is they think, well, if God came to earth, surely God would show everybody who God was. But actually, Jesus was a northerner.
Well, do you know how Herod Antipas or Herod Agrippa dies? Or Herod Antipas?
Isn't that something about worms?
Yeah.
It's really gross.
Which is an interesting story because, so it's in the book of Acts, and there's this idea that Herod comes out and he's dressed in shining robes, silver robes or gold robes, and the light is shining off them. He's done it on purpose to look like a sun god.
Right.
And the crowd shouts. Remember, he's a Jewish king who's also pagan, right? And the crowd is shouting for him, and saying, "Oh, it looks like he sounds like a god when he speaks." And Herod doesn't tell them to be quiet. And so, in the book of Acts, it says, so he was struck down, and he was eaten by worms and died. Right?
It's so disgusting.
So you might think that of all the stories in the book of Acts, that might be one of the least historically reliable ones, right? Like,
yeah, that does not sound real.
Weirdly, that's one of the stories that we use to date the book of Acts and ground it in historical accuracy. Because that story is actually mentioned outside of the New Testament.
Well, in Josephus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Herod shows up and he's wearing the silver robes, and Josephus tells us that he was struck down by a stomach worm, like a parasite.
Gross.
And it's really interesting, isn't it?
That
story, it's actually like, it has outside corroboration. But anyway,
yeah.
But that is Herod, who says, everyone look at me and worship me, right?
Yeah.
Jesus says, oh, you go ahead, I'll come secretly.
Yeah.
And it's constantly, Jesus has never actually calls attention to himself. In fact, he goes out of his way to stop people from following him sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, he moves from place to place. When he gets when they start to queue up outside the door, he will just go.
He will run away. Or in the Gospel of Mark, he famously people keep saying you're the Messiah, and he keeps telling them, don't use that word, or stop talking about it, right? He'll often tell people to stop talking about it.
I mean, even after the transfiguration with 3 of his best friends, he told them not to talk about it.
And then they'll turn around and they'll say, you're the Messiah, and he'll say, Satan, get behind me, Satan. And he's constantly saying, like, stop using those words, because the word Messiah just means king. And he's basically saying, stop saying that. You don't know what it means yet. You think that king means King Herod killing all the babies and standing on a platform with shiny golden robes. Yeah. You don't know what the king is yet. So stop saying.
I mean, they hadn't really had a great history of kings. There'd been a few good ones, but only peppered in amongst some pretty bad ones.
Wow, think of how kingship was always planned.
Yeah.
Like, kingship was never supposed to be the thing that you're supposed to do.
Well, I mean, that's what Samuel was prompted to tell people, wasn't it? That your king will lord it over you. They'll take loads of stuff. They'll make you do stuff.
They'll take your children. They'll take your money. And it's like he said, right, if that's what you want, I guess you can have it. And it's like getting what they wanted was their punishment.
Yeah.
Right? And there is this idea that, like, I know this is controversial in the Church of England, but there's definitely an idea running through the Bible that, like, official governments and states and monarchies and things they're not good. They are plan B. They are there because things went wrong, not things are going right, you know?
Yeah. I've been thinking about that so much, especially since Remembrance Sunday and all of that, and that weird juxtaposition between church and state, that this year we've had to really look at it quite carefully, because the church and the state had slightly different rules about what we were allowed to do.
About how much you could meet.
On Remembrance, yeah, how much you can meet. And so for the first time, maybe in a long time, we had to think, well, a lot of the people who were to do with the state here are also in church. So yeah, it's
like what was the conflict? What was the difference?
The difference was who was organizing Remembrance Sunday,
yeah.
And what would happen actually on Remembrance Day. So a lot of things are assumed will happen.
Yeah.
It's assumed that the rector might turn up,
right,
and look, rectory.
I mean, that's a constant thing, isn't it? Of like, is Remembrance Sunday a state holiday or a religious holiday? And if you really want to make it a Christian holiday, then you need to start to say more things about war than perhaps you'd want to say if it was a state holiday, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've always been encouraged, I guess, that every church that I've been involved in, it's never about saying that war is a good thing.
Yeah, right.
And we're always talking about peace and hoping for peace and praying for peace for the future. But yeah, that juxtaposition between church and state is an interesting thing. So when I got ordained, I had to vow obedience to the Queen.
Ooh.
Yeah, I even signed something. It was not in my blood, but I did sign it.
Yeah.
Because at that stage I signed anything that was put in front of me. So, and in some ways it's good. It's a good thing that we are the established church.
Right.
I guess. I don't know.
Why is it good? What's it brought?
Well, because the Church of England is the church that people come to when they're not particularly churchy.
Yeah, right.
This is where you come for your funeral or your wedding or.
Your collar. Do you think they think you're like an arm of the state?
I don't think so.
Of the state.
Some people ask me if I'm in dress up. And I don't know whether I should tell that story, but the very first day I wore this, I went into a pub, and because I do, and I was meeting some friends there, I think maybe a ladies group or something like that, and some card at the bar asked me if I was the stripper.
Oh wow, the big arts kind of thing.
Yes, both at the same time. So I think, I don't know, people look at it and think different things. It's I don't think people think that you're an arm of the state at all. It's hopefully it's something a little bit more comforting. I don't know.
I guess what I'm asking, when people see the collar, do they think King Herod or do they think John the Baptist?
No, they think something a lot more boring. They think Vicar of Dibley.
Right.
Something like that.
Right.
Or lately Rev. Or Kate Botley.
If the whole point of the New Testament of the Jesus story was that he was like this wilderness challenge to centers of power.
Yeah.
How do you see that happening for you? Like, how can you do that in your churches, in Ewhurst, your Anglican churches? How could you continue that good tradition
of challenging centers of power?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would always say that I mean, this is just me personally, that I'm always more interested in what I can do outside of the church. I mean, yes, I love the Church of England. I love its weirdness and its breadth and depth and history. But I love the fact that this gives me a platform to talk about Jesus. People expect that. So I go and chat to people. I'll go and be part of other groups that are happening in this community.
Right.
I'll go and use the platform that I'm given because of my job and talk about whatever I need to. So I don't know, I guess it does give a certain amount of I guess it can be helpful. But it's always about trying to further the mission of Christ wherever you are.
What kind of power do you think your churches have right now that they might have inherited?
What kind of power?
So the whole thing of Jesus and John the Baptist in the wilderness was when they were baptized.
Yeah.
It was essentially a movement to leave behind the privilege they'd been born into and to go into the wilderness. So a baptism was like, I'm going to say goodbye to all these things. I'm going to say goodbye to being a Pharisee. I'm going to say goodbye to being a Sadducee. I'm going to say goodbye to being a Herodian. I'm going to say, kind of leave behind all those things that came with being a member of a certain group. And I'm going to be born into the wilderness, like away from the centers of power and into a new way of being a person of God, right? And Jesus takes that back, like that's the baptism he identifies with. And it was seen as a challenge to Herod.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm wondering, like today, what might be the equivalent? Like what kind of privileges and powers have we inherited? How do we give them away or get rid of them?
Yeah.
What's the wilderness look like for Ewhurst? What's the
Ewhurst, Oakwood, and Forest Green. We've got 3 churches. We've got a big parish here.
3 churches. What does wilderness look like? What does baptism in the wilderness look like for the 3 churches?
So the question is, what kind of power do we have already that we've inherited, and how can we give it away?
Yeah, or what? Yeah, if that was what the people of God were meant to do, which was to hold their power lightly.
Yeah.
And to willingly embrace not being in a position of power anymore.
That is a really good question. I don't know the answer. I do not know the answer to that.
I mean, you already mentioned it a bit. It's like you're part of the fabric of the village, I guess. The church and
we're trying to create a new community in some ways.
It's a way to use your power, right? So you could the church has relational network power right now.
Yeah.
You could use it. You could choose to use it for yourselves, or you could choose to open up your relational networks in service of other people around you, right? In service of the villages.
Yeah.
For example, that would be a way of giving away your power.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to think about that quite a lot. And please, anybody, feel free to type anything in the chat. It's absolutely totally free of things at the moment.
I'm just trying to think, how do we make an Advent? How do we think in terms of wilderness, Advent, and King Herod right now, today, with our churches?
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, we are very much, we're literally in the wilderness. We're at the edge of the diocese. We're in the middle of the woods. We're very far away from things. Pardon?
Do you think people resent that right now?
No, I don't think so. I think in some ways we've got a huge amount of power because we have space.
Well, I was going to say, like, that's a good thing to be on the like,
we've got space, we've got beauty all around us. We've actually got a very fairly low incidence of COVID at the moment. There's a huge, I mean, people have been looking after their neighbors a lot. It's also per capita, we are not poor.
Right.
We're quite
one of the things to be open-handed about.
We've got quite tight purse strings, shall we say, but we're not poor.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who've moved here after doing very powerful jobs. And there are some very powerful, strong networks of people within our churches.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why the wilderness was where the Christian movement started, was because it, like you even said, it's something actually quite freeing about being away from all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of like having connections. So a church will already be might not be rich with money, but you'll probably already have more friendly connections built up than a lot of other people or networks in your area. Yeah. So you might be poor in money, but rich in relationships. And being in the wilderness actually gives you a sense of like, oh, we are now if we were in the cities or centers of power, we would be a small fish in a big pond. But we can now be a big fish in a small pond. How do we use that well for other people?
Yeah.
We use the relational networks that we have well for other people.
Yeah, I think that's a good question.
That's a kind of a wilderness type way of thinking of like, all right, we got some power now. How do we use it? How do we give it away?
Mm.
Ask yourself, what would King Herod do, and then do the opposite.
Herod would kill everybody.
Yeah, because Herod, the figure of Herod, is all about consolidation of like, I can't give anything away. I must make sure everybody believes me. I must make sure everybody worships me, or I must make sure that there's no threads untied. I need to tie up everything, right?
He did. I was so struck that he did everything in his own strength, and he had a lot of strength.
Yes, and this is the character of Herod. That's part of the guy. Is like, yeah, he's worried about his own power. He's clutching tightly to it. He's doing whatever it takes to keep a hold of it. And so it's like, all right, what's the opposite of that? Jesus is the opposite of Herod in every way.
Yeah.
So this is why we kind of think, who's our King Herods today? What does it look like to be a King Herod today?
Do we want an actual answer to that? I just want to point out that we've had a couple of chat things. So yeah. I'm
not reading the chat, so I'll let you gatekeep and read them.
Okay, cool. So John White, who's is going to be chatting with us next week, because he's actually preaching this week on Anna and Simeon.
Oh wow, good.
So yeah. Yeah, we're just various people talking about how we reach out to people, and we meant, people are asking, is it spiritually or how are we meaning this? I think spiritually reaching out to people, or in other ways.
Well, I don't really know what the difference between if you were to pool your resources and run an outdoor COVID-friendly garden Christmas party for everybody in the village, for example, you tell me, is that spiritual or is that physical, right? I think it's both. I think
they're undividable, whatever that word is. They're all together.
If you used there's relational connections in any church for like, if you use those connections to help other people find work, for example, or to pull together to run a food bank or something, there's lots of things you can do to be like, we've got the ability together to do something.
Yeah.
How could we use this to help the people around us? That is a spiritual act as well as.
We know that. We're like that.
Eileen, I think I hear you.
Is that what you do? Do you do that kind of stuff already?
We do some. I mean, what we are going to be doing in just before Christmas is we're doing 3 big sings. So Will's putting together 3 and a team are putting together 3 big carol sings. Yeah. So it's going to be some of the only opportunity that people will have to actually get together and sing outside. And right. because we have power as the church and we have this ability, we've gone ahead and done that. So that's been really great.
And anything you could do to make that as welcoming to anybody, even the non-churchy people, is itself
absolutely
is going to be your way of using your power for others.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone loves being Christmassy, and people like coming to church at Christmas because it feels normal.
Yeah, this is one of the things you've inherited. This is one of the things Anglicans have inherited, which is it's not a proper Christmas unless you go to church.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you inherited that. You didn't have to do any work for that. People believe that.
Yeah.
And now you're the one in charge, right? So I feel like those are some of the things we could do. We could be like, oh, we've been given all that power to make people's Christmas the proper Christmas. How are we going to?
So let's enjoy it rather than go, oh no, not again, and start.
That is true. Yeah. I know some churches that really grumble.
Oh yeah,
and I know churches that are like, oh, we actually have strangers who want to come into our doors. We're going to use this well, and we're going to give them a good good party.
Yeah, party, but not necessarily try and force the gospel down their throat.
Oh no, we're going to show that we like them.
Yeah,
we like those people.
And also that we actually quite enjoy life, because I think people can have this idea of Christianity as something that's fairly awful and po-faced and grumpy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I do feel like those kinds of events can be, they might not look very churchy, right? They're just fun. Like if you were to put on a storytelling evening one day, or if you were going to run an arts festival, or those kinds of things, they are spiritual because they're about the whole of life. They're affirming lots of aspects of life.
Yeah. So somebody's mentioning about on BBC News last night, it was shown that 2 churches were reaching out to desperate parishioners and wondering in what way do we reach out to our community. But I think we've kind of been touching on that. So
a lot of hidden poverty. You mentioned you're rich.
I know there's a lot of hidden poverty, and Belinda's mentioned that too.
Already money.
Yeah.
Right now, loneliness.
Yes.
Right now, with lockdown, loneliness is the biggest thing. Like relational poverty is huge, and there are people who don't have anyone.
Yeah.
And don't have any contact to anyone, right? And so those kinds of things, like anything we can do as a church to take it out onto the street, to go out to the...
So Fiona and John, you're actually not muted at the moment. Could you?
Aren't we?
No.
No.
I don't know. I can't make it up.
You can mute all, actually, Clare, as the host. So.
But then I'll mute you. I'm not entirely sure how to do that. I need to figure it out.
You can mute all, then I can. Yeah, I think that you still meet out in the car park for church?
No. So we stopped that when it started getting cold.
Yeah, right.
So and then we started going back into the buildings, which became I mean it's just different. So Fiona and John, you're still available. How do I find mute all? Do you know?
I don't remember. I think it might be under participants.
Participants. Okay. Mute all, and then I've just muted us. Nope.
Here we are.
Okay, cool.
I don't know.
I can still see some other people not muted. I don't know how to do it.
No.
Can you hear?
There we go. Okay. Now you're on. This is why now.
And here we go. I'm unmuted. Everybody else is muted, but I'm unmuted.
Yay! Okay.
Look at that. Clare devolving her power locally would be a massive challenge for the parish. It would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but what would that even look like?
I'm not even just talking about you. I'm talking about the church, us,
the church,
the Christian
the
community.
church with
Us as a network of believers. We have access to friendship communities. We have access to more money. We have access to contacts. We have access to creativity. We have global international contacts that nobody else has. Like we've got a lot. We're rich in lots of ways, even if we don't necessarily have lots of money. And also, let's be honest, we also have lots of money in lots of ways.
comparative to the rest of the world.
That's part of it as well. And I just feel like it's not saying we absolutely must all be doing the same thing all the time. It's just more like, think, okay, if King Herod was the guy that is all about collecting resources and using them only for himself, how do we do the opposite?
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking, is like, identify your resources and think, how do I use it for someone else? Like that would be the Advent kind of way of thinking, if we're going to keep using King Herod as our example here. And it's part of the politics of Jesus. The Jesus politics are, because politics is all about how we organize ourselves and use our power, right? That's what politics is. So the politics of Jesus is, if you're around Jesus, if you're a Jesus person and you're following the way of Jesus, how do we organize ourselves so that our power is being used not for ourselves, but for others?
Yeah. So I can think of one example straight away that kind of made me think really hard last week, because I was in a school governors meeting.
Yeah.
And of course, I've got 3 churches in the middle of the countryside. They're all beautiful old buildings. It cost a lot of money to maintain. We need to give a lot of money to our diocese just in order to be. It's a fairly constant thing, trying to think about how we can raise money, how we can be okay. It's quite worrying. And sitting in the governor's meeting, it was very similar. So they're always needing to find extra money, and they were asking me, can I get involved in fundraising? I was thinking, I can't think of anything worse than having to do this again,
right,
in a different context. And then I thought, actually, no, this needs to be shared.
Yeah. And
the more we share with each other, surely the easier it's going to be to feel like part of that community. And I don't know. Yeah. I've got a conversation with somebody tomorrow to talk about that very thing. It's not something that I'm comfortable with doing particularly. I didn't get into this gig to be raising money.
But I think you've got more of a wealth. I think. So have you heard of the idea of a poverty mindset or an orphan spirit? Have you ever heard that kind of thing?
Yeah. I find it really useful, actually.
The idea that when Jesus says famously, he says, I do not let your hearts be troubled. I do not leave you as orphans. I'm giving my Holy Spirit. And so a lot of times some sort of Christians talk about the orphan spirit, and they mean by that, but like, are you going through life thinking there isn't enough, I'm going to be abandoned, there's not enough resources for me, I haven't got anything? Or are you going through life saying, I will get what I need, there is actually enough, there's enough to do what I have to do, and I'll always be receiving what I need? And that's the kind of mindset that we're looking at. And your situation might be exactly the same. We're not saying like that by being a Christian, you're going to have lots of money just pouring into your bank account. We're not saying that. What we're saying is, how are you facing life? Are you facing life saying, I will have access to any resources that I need when I need them? Or are you facing life going, I'm never going to have what I need? And that's the difference, right? And I wonder whether when we are if your school asks you to be involved in fundraising, you have 2 choices. You could be like, I hate that, I'm really bad at it. Or you could say, I actually have access to a wider network of people than anybody else in this school. I've got the ability to contact my friends and peers and fellow vicars. I have a bank of information I could draw from. I could probably do this job. I have enough to do it. Right?
It's not about being Pollyanna and pretending that everything is okay.
Definitely not. Because fundraising is still a crap job, but it's still boring.
And it's still embarrassing sometimes.
But you could use your power. You have power and you could use it.
It's a very, very difficult thing to accept sometimes. But yes, I do. I
think we Christians we're a lot richer than we think in terms of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
We have more social capital. That's what they call it. We have more to draw from than you might think.
I've been reflecting a lot on the parable of the prodigal son in the past few weeks for various reasons, and specifically on the elder son who stayed at home and his attitude to his father when the prodigal son comes back, and the elder son is just so angry because he feels he is just as lost in his own way, and he thinks he is so angry at his younger brother. So I think we often think as Christians, I don't know.
Well, there's just a good quote came up just now about delegating power.
Yeah.
And I there's something really good about it. I like to use the imagery of clutching tightly or open-handed, right?
Yeah.
And you think about the older son, he was like, why didn't you do that for me? This is me, I'm the older son. Why didn't you kill the fatted calf for me? I've always done. He's
never give me anything.
He's very clutching tightly to what is rightfully his, right?
Look, I'm here doing the work.
If you think about a delegator, a really good delegator is somebody who says, basically they're like, I could do this job better, but I'm going to choose to give you the power. That's partly what's going on. Like, a good delegator knows, I'm going to give you the opportunity to do this work, not because I think you'll be better at it than me, but because I know it'll be good for you. And so they hold it lightly, what they've got, their skills, their talents, their time, right? And they delegate it. And I do think like the prodigal son is angry and holds clutches tightly. The open-handed person says, oh, whatever is mine could be yours.
Yeah.
And the delegation of power, actually, what that ends up doing is it actually is less King Herod and brittle and violent. And it's more empowering lots of people eventually.
Which is something that I'm always really, really thankful about in this parish, is that there are lots of people who want to get involved. And I hope that I'm quite good at delegating to people and giving people power. I really don't want to have it all for myself.
I think one of the things Christians don't know that they have that they could give to the world is that they're happy that sometimes they do things crap, and that's okay. Right? So you don't have to.
How is that a blessing?
Because
to be crap.
To be involved. Because you don't have to audition. Because you don't have to be cool or trendy or rich to be a part of the church.
What are you saying, that we're not cool or trendy or rich?
I hope
what?
Like, the church isn't putting on a slick show.
No, we certainly are not.
Everyone has something to give.
Yeah.
And it might look a bit funny and crumbly, but there's more important things in life than it being a slick show.
It's about being truly yourself, right? And giving people the opportunity to do that,
and
which
everybody gets to have something to bring.
Yeah, I've been talking about this quite a lot with a couple of friends recently, is how vulnerable should we be as church leaders? Because you never want the person who's preaching to be using the pulpit as their psychiatrist couch.
No.
But you want people to be real and to, yeah. So we've had some good things. So talking really about what we've got. I mean, Will and I have been talking quite seriously about how much we could give away if we absolutely needed to.
Right.
How little we could survive on, because there's a possibility potentially that we might be able to employ an assistant priest or somebody to work with me, but we would need to find some money. And Will and I have always said that if we're asking other people to do this, we will do it as well.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there's a danger of professionalization of Christianity with the Church of England. One of the dangers is that everybody thinks the vicar is the professional Christian, and we all don't have to do anything.
I'm thankful, very thankful, that there are a lot of people who are willing to get stuck in and do things in this parish. It's really good.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
that can be the real issue when people think, oh, I don't need to do it because it's their job to do that. Like, no, it's not good for anybody when their job is to be a Christian.
Well, no, it really isn't. It's the hardest thing in the world. One of the big parts of my job is to make sure that I'm still a Christian and to do praying and things. And there's a reason why your priest is meant to pray at least twice a day. It's because if they're not doing that, that's ridiculous.
Well, stay out in the wilderness. Stay away from hoarding power. Stay away from hoarding resources.
I won't be Herod, so I'm not going to be building my own fake volcano anytime soon.
How we look Christian is when we are not looking like Herod.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how you stay it. That's why there's lots of vicars running around who aren't very Christian anymore.
What? Because they're
power games, clutching tightly to their resources.
Oh man. It's so people have been talking about what different forms of wealth as well. So it's not just about counting money, is it? It's sorts of things. Yeah. We've got time, we've got creativity,
abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've realized that, so there's some, put it this way, everybody right now listening knows somebody who's lonely.
Yeah.
Like right now, you know somebody who's the loneliest person you know. And so it's like, who is that person? Okay, what can we do for that person? Could we send them a handwritten letter and pop it under the door? Could we offer to go for a walk with them outside? Could we, you know, like I've got that in my life. I know somebody, she is the loneliest person I know. I'm not saying she's the loneliest person in the whole wide world, but she's the loneliest person I know.
Yeah.
So my wife and I think, all right, how can we share we're wealthy in terms of relationship. What can we do? So we go for walks with her every week and stuff.
Stephen, that's a lovely, lovely thing. I have a terribly unchristian question.
Yeah.
What if the loneliest person you know is awful?
Well, they probably are.
Oh.
But this is what we do, right? Because but then the thing is, part of the richness that we have is that you happen to know lots of lovely people. So what you do, you say, I'm gonna take a hit for the team. I'm gonna spend an hour with this not very nice, lonely person who's unpleasant. And I'm gonna let them moan at me for an hour. But then I'm gonna get in touch with my I'm wealthy. I know lots of really lovely, well-adjusted people. And I'm gonna get in touch with one of them and say, I just spent an hour with X. Please, can I come? And because we've got each other's backs, right? So when you're a follower of Jesus, you're not by yourself, you're sharing it. So it's like one person is spending time using their resources for the lonely, but then they're getting topped up because they're spending time with their friends. This is, if we start thinking that way, it starts to work, you know?
Yeah.
And you don't burn out because you're not just constantly doing it all by yourself. So that's the kind of, when you see that happening, that's like the kingdom of God happening.
Yeah.
It's really gentle, and it doesn't require a band and a smoke machine and a stage and lots of money.
Well, it's just as well, because we don't have, well, we have some of those things, but not the smoke machine.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
No, but smoke machines are cool.
But Claire, I mean, that person probably is going to be awful. Like loneliness, you're either lonely because you're an awful person and nobody else around you, or you become crabbed and sad and because you're lonely. And of course those things go together, right? But that's
so we need to be really worried now if we get loads and loads of letters and people asking if they want to come and have a walk with us, because we might be that person.
Then you graciously accept it.
Thank you.
I mean, I've got a friend here in our village, and she's running this thing called a light show. Like, it's an outdoor event. It's lockdown proof, you know, and it's just this kind of Christmas light event, and she's putting it on, and people are going to come and they can take their children for a walk. And it's basically, she's realized people are bored. Parents are bored, and old people are bored. And she's like, well, what can we do? And I just think that's really creative. She's not going to change the world, but she's just put on an event which is going to bless my neighborhood because now there's something to do.
Yeah.
And it's things like that I find that's really useful. She's not just thinking about how do I entertain myself. She's thinking, how could I help entertain other people?
Yeah.
And
I think that's really great. Just little ideas like that. I mean, we've got something kind of brewing literally in the future. We're going to buy a little van or a tuk-tuk and make it into a mobile coffee cart thing.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
you tell back to that great question. Is that spirit? Do I mean that spirit?
That's all the things. Mind, body, spirit, all the stuff.
Exactly. And I think that is spiritual. The smell of coffee is a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
And it's going to encourage people, I think.
Definitely.
That's a good idea. Tell me more about this coffee thing. When's that?
So you can get a tuk-tuk basically.
Yeah.
You get it all kitted out with a gadget machine and proper tea brewing facilities, and sides that go down and up, and you can just drive it around, and we park it in the village car parks at drop-off time for the school and nursery, because the parents all hang out there anyway, but most of them just hang out in their car.
So suggestion for you.
Pardon?
Here's another suggestion for you for that.
Okay.
Can you identify some people for whom the work experience of running that would be really helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's already a small small and very loud list of people who want to drive it, because it's driving a tuk-tuk. That's fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
So, yeah.
But like, just think, don't necessarily think, oh, I'll do it myself because I'd be better at it. Think, who could use that?
Yeah.
And
yeah, you're right. Give it away. It doesn't always have to have a color on it.
How can we give it away?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the coffee itself is going to be free, but we're going to say if people want to give a donation. So, yeah.
But you can give away so much more than just the coffee. You can give the work experience. You can give.
Yeah.
You can say to a local business, hey, if we park outside here, like if we do the coffee, maybe you want to do the buns and the muffins, and do you know what I mean? Like, you can help share some. You can help improve the local resources as well.
It's little stuff like that. So yeah. Claire, as you know, most of the lovely people on the Zoom tonight are massively supporting our family and friends. Yes.
So I wonder whether we can help each other support our friends.
Yeah.
We often think we're very individualistic now, and we live in these little bubbles where we think it's just me and my family. But if you're part of the movement of Jesus, then you've got resources. Like, there's this idea that we've got each other's back.
Yeah.
And that rather than go, oh, isn't that awful? She's having such a hard time with her family. It could be more like, oh, I can tell you're having a hard time with your family. Would it help to spend some time with us for a while to top up your batteries? Or, you know, there's things we can do to help each other, even though we're all responsible for our own families.
Yeah. That's really good.
Anyway, this is lockdown survival, COVID crazy Britain strategy survival times.
I think a phrase that's often come up in the last few weeks for me is that this is the time for gentle survival. So we need it's not the time for massively thriving and changing things, but it's the time we need to be gentle to each other, and we've got to survive.
I agree. And so we think, all right, how do we help each other take care of our families?
Yeah.
Our friends, how do we do that? It's not meant to be like work harder. It's more like striving. Nobody wants striving. It's more like, what do we have? Who are we responsible for right now? How can we help each other do that?
Yeah, but you know, one of the greatest things and problems and issues is that we need people to be able to ask for what they need.
Yeah,
because we, like you said before, we're so individualistic and we're in our own little bubbles and maybe sorting a few things out for our family and friends and neighbors. But we need to get to a point, and I hope we do get to a point where we can say what we need. We
already had to. This actually ties. Somebody's made a thing. This is a time for innovation, which I'm going to link it. Watch me do this.
Hey, seamlessly.
I absolutely agree. It's a really interesting time for innovation. And so one of the things that we did in our church was that we did run a food bank, right? But now we noticed, of course, that people don't like to admit they need the food bank, but they don't want to admit that they need the food bank because it's hard to admit that you need help. So they've innovated, and they're calling it the storage house or the storehouse or something. And they've just changed the name, and they've changed slightly the function of it. It is still a food bank, but it actually is now more of like a place in the village where people can bring their extra furniture or extra food or extra whatever. And it's called a storehouse rather than a food bank. And they've kind of expanded the idea to make it a bit more fun and friendly and accessible. And they realized that people could now come for help who might be otherwise embarrassed to go in, you know.
Okay.
Feel like those are some interesting ideas of people doing. It doesn't require lots of money just to change your name.
Yeah.
I think this time of lockdown has been really, like, for innovation and coming up with new ideas. It's like a big reset button that's pressed on our lives, and it doesn't have to be all bad. Like, life as before wasn't all good, right? So the fact that it stopped isn't a total disaster.
No, there is things that are happening. Like, we would never have done this.
Right.
We would never have had basically a home group with you and I talking.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah.
And there's so many different things like this.
Yeah, so I'm always looking serious. I am thinking, how can I use this time? It's not like I think lockdown is this amazing, wonderful time that has really benefited me, but I do want to not be an orphan spirit about it. I want to say, what is redeemable about this time? What new thing can I learn or do? What good things am I seeing around me? And it's not Pollyanna, right? I don't want to act like that, but it is just this idea of like, oh, right, maybe there's something good that could come of this. We could innovate. We could adapt in good ways. Because I don't know, I wasn't that happy with my older life. I didn't think it was that good. And the fact that it's all stopped hasn't. I've realized maybe I've been rescued from something. Travel all the time. I was up and down to London 2 or 3 times a week. I was always moving around. I was every single Sunday. I was teaching in somebody else's church somewhere.
Yeah.
And I haven't had to do that for 9 months. That's good for me.
Yeah.
I could complain and worry, or I could realize, oh, maybe there's something good about that.
There's always good things. So another great thing that's happening in our parish, and just through lockdown, is because people weren't able to go to gyms, people really want to exercise together. And there's a guy called Nutty who set up a boot camp in our local rec ground, and he's got loads and loads of people on his books already.
Yeah,
and
right.
It's created a community that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
And that's just wonderful, really good.
That happened. Like, is the church finding new ways to be part of the community as a result of lockdown?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're online every night. We do night prayers, Compline, every night on Facebook Live, and I have people coming up to me saying, I feel like I know you already and I've never met you.
People who would never have come to the building are coming to online.
Yeah. Because you can now come to church in your PJs. I mean, you already could do, but people would have looked at you funny. And so people are getting to know John White, who's here, and Kay and David do night prayers as well. And we've kind of, it's good.
That is good, right?
Yeah. We would never have done that before.
And what are you going to do when the government says, all right, everyone back into your churches again? What are you going to do?
Well, we will do that, but we're also, David, who's here, has arranged for us to get a grant so we can get Wi-Fi into 2 of our church buildings, so we can have both, and so people can come to church and then. Yeah.
See.
Yeah. That would never have happened otherwise.
Exactly. It's given something. We're all used to. Nobody loves Zoom, but at least we know it's possible.
Oh yeah, I mean, how many people are in contact with their grandkids and people who wouldn't have known how to use Zoom before do now? So that's good. Yeah, kind of. My parents started off at the beginning of lockdown with daily Zooms.
Right.
Our family. That is too much. No, but it is good to be able to pop in and see people. But
how do you comply? You're gonna continue with it, are you?
I think so. I think it's fairly easy. I mean, I have forgotten on Saturday a couple of times, but I'm usually reminded by someone. Pardon?
So people are at their computer waiting for you, and you're not there.
Oh yeah, apparently. There've been a couple of moments where it hasn't. I don't know. It's not just because of Strictly, but.
Do you share silence together online, or?
I haven't done that for a while. I started off doing that, so doing prayer of silence, but it's really odd sharing silence online. I mean, it's doable, but it's very different. Yeah. I love shared silence. I find that really useful. But yeah, that's a good point. Do more of that.
Well, I'm curious, because I've never joined it, so I'm curious how you're innovating, how you're doing something new, which people only ever associate with a building. I wonder what's changed now that you're doing it online.
Yeah. I mean, we never did it before, so.
Oh really?
No.
Oh, so that is.
It just started off as a good way to connect with people, and it started off as something to, it's totally new.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. See, you got all those riches locked away and now you're using them.
Yeah. Yeah, and who knows what else? Because I love this though, that basically look at Herod and do the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my Advent takeaway point from this.
He was a bad guy.
And he's the opposite to King Jesus is different than King Herod on purpose.
Yeah.
Herod is not the only king in the Gospels. Jesus is always there, and he's always the king as well. And
yeah.
All different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Does anybody have any more questions for us? Because I think we're probably getting to the end. So yes, I think we've talked about money. We've talked about how we can share things. We talked about people who their only income is their state pension. So yeah, not everybody is rolling in money.
Nope.
I don't believe that at all. But we've got a lot to share.
So next week we're going to look at Simeon and Anna.
Yes.
And the prophecies in the temple culture.
Yeah.
And that's going to be really fun.
Yeah, I like those two. I mean, we talk about them every night in Compline anyway, because Song of Simeon. Okay. Lord, you can let your servant go in peace. So and they were people who hung out in the temple a lot.
Well, I will go do my research and I'll see if I can figure out the socio-political aspects of Simeon and Anna.
Okay, great. And you're going to be talking with John and myself next week. So,
really?
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. I look forward to that. So is John going to be preaching on it?
John's preaching on it on Sunday. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I think I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephen.
Wow. It's nice to see you, Church. It's nice to see you.
Yeah.
Enjoy this time. There's good stuff's going to come out of this.
I think so. I think this is good. It's different already.
And I expect your 5,000 word essay next week, and I'll mark it.
What? No, Stephen. No. I'm never going to write an essay again. I really, though, actually, I'm so tempted to do a master's, but I just don't know what I'm doing.